Dynamics and compression, it's not just about loudness, it's about control and impact. And that's what we are looking into today. This is your complete mixing course and we are in our third module. When it comes to audio, dynamics refer to the variation in volume levels within an audio signal. Think about a drum recording or a vocal track that shifts from loud to soft throughout a song or vice versa. And the upper limit and lower limits of the variation, the difference between the loudest and softest levels, define the dynamic range, but more on that later. When mixing, it's crucial to keep an eye on how the volume changes throughout the song. These variations in dynamics can significantly affect the listener's experience. For example, it's a common practice to keep the verses softer in volume and less cluttered compared to the chorus, and this allows the listener to feel the impact when the chorus hits. And you need to keep this in mind when you sit to gain stage. I'm hoping that you watched the gain staging module of this course. One very important thing we discussed in the first module is that you should have a vision of where you're going with your mix. So how loud or soft an instrument or all the sounds would be throughout the song is something you'll have to take care of in the beginning stage of mixing. Before we move forward, I would like to let you know that we have released 2 free multi-genre sample packs with 140 plus industry level sounds, and they can be used in genres like pop, hip-hop to even electronic music. So go check them out. The link is in the description and pinned comment. And now back to the video. If you dive into the literature on audio levels and dynamics, you might encounter terms like macro and micro dynamics. While not commonly used, they help illustrate how we address dynamics in recording and mixing. Well, macro dynamics refers to the changes in level over a long period. For instance, a rhythmic instrument like a guitar or keyboard may play softly during the verses and swell in volume during the choruses. On the other hand, micro dynamics focuses on more rapid changes, and this can mean variations from note to note within a phrase where some notes are accented and played louder. It can also describe differences in level within a single note, like a hard hit piano note or a drum hit that starts with a sharp transient peak and then gradually decays to silence. The specific terms macro and micro are not the main focus. What matters is understanding how dynamics levels fluctuate in music. These variations are crucial for recordists and mixers to manage, whether for technical accuracy or creative expression. And we accomplish this using standard dynamics tools, both hardware and software processors that we utilize every day to shape and control audio dynamics. In mixing, there are 4 main types of dynamic processors that you will find, or in the dynamics submenu of your DAW plugin inserts, and these processors fall into 2 main categories: those that reduce dynamic range and those that increase it. And dynamic range reduction is the most common application. In a multi-track mix, you'll typically use compressors and limiters to reduce dynamic range, while expanders and gates are used to increase it. Compression is likely the most widely used type of dynamics processing, but all of these tools can be incredibly useful. In this video, we are diving into only compressors, and the rest of it will be covered in our intermediate course that will be coming out later. I made a very simplified video before on dynamic range and compression, and that's really the simplest and most accurate explanation, so I'm just attaching that here in this video. Before we dive into compression, let's first understand why we even use it in the first place. Any sound coming out of your speakers moves back and forth, and there are quiet parts and louder parts. I can easily demonstrate this with my voice. The closer I get to the microphone, the louder I sound. The further away I am, the quieter I become. This volume difference is called the dynamic range of an audio. In other words, the dynamic range is the difference between the loudest and the quietest part of audio. In this audio, the loudest is 0 dB and the quietest part is -2 dB. So the dynamic range of this audio is the loudest part minus the quietest part, which is 2 dB. And the reason we compress is that we want this difference or this back and forth to be more manageable and more controlled. When a sound has less dynamic range, it's easier to focus on and pay attention to because it feels tighter and more consistent. Here's how this take sounds before compression. And here's how it sounds after compression. You can even see the visual difference here. The compressed take with less dynamic range should feel more consistent and more controlled. Now, just because you understand what it means to compress, that doesn't mean you understand how to use it. So, an example. Here's a waveform representing any audio, and here's a compressor. The threshold of a compressor is like a line you set. When the sound goes louder than this line or crosses this line, the compressor starts to work and controls how loud it gets. Attack is the time it takes for the signal to be fully compressed, and release is actually the opposite. The release time is how long the compressor takes to let go after making the sound quieter
or stop compression. Ratio specifies the amount of reduction applied to the signal above the threshold. Imagine you are squeezing a balloon. The harder you squeeze, the ratio in a compressor is like deciding how much to squeeze when the sound gets too loud. For example, if you have a 4:1 ratio and the sound gets 4 times louder than what you want, the compressor only lets one part through and squeezes the other 3 parts down. Now, let's not get too excited about compression. Many digital sounds don't need compression to sound consistent because they already have little to no dynamic range. However, when it comes to human performed recordings that might be imperfect, you'll almost always want to use a compressor.
We'll talk about how to practically use these processes in our intermediate course, but for now, here's some good news. I have released 2 free multi-genre sample packs, and if you haven't checked them out yet, the links are in the description and pinned comments. So go check them out. They're really good. And I will see you in the next module, which is going to be on reverb and delay.